Everyone, thank you for joining. Happy Thursday. Wonderful. Give it a couple more seconds for some people to join us. This is going to be an awesome episode, everyone. I think we're all a little bit, probably feeling like a little worried or excited or both about heading to RSA next week, but I'm really glad we're taking the time to talk about this week. Maybe we can do a quick collective deep breath. Ready? Okay, in. And out. Everything's gonna be absolutely fine. Good job. I hope we didn't need that actually. Okay, wonderful. Got some people joining us here. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Cybersecurity Standup. I'm Bronwyn Hudson, your host, and also the Uptick social media manager. Today, I'm joined again by my wonderful coworkers, Crystal and Jack. And today, we have a very special guest, Chris Castaldo, who is the CISO of Crossbeam and also the author of Startup Secure: Baking Cybersecurity into Your Company from Founding to Exit. Super exciting. And if you're joining us live, I'm very happy to tell you, you probably already know because you've seen all the promo, but we are giving away free copies of Chris's book today, which is super wonderful. There will be, yeah, there it is, promo it. Shortly, I will be dropping a link and a super secret password into the comments. Just so you know, this is only available for the duration of the live. So if you're here, you're in the right place. I'm really looking forward to hearing Chris's thoughts on this topic. And make sure to grab your copy of the book. So we'll start off with the classic lightning round of introductions here. Chris, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, being CISO, and about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the ability to be here and talk with everyone today. So, as you said, I'm the CISO at Crossbeam, the author of Startup Secure. I also advise a bunch of different startups, safe-based, took long list. Also, board member of a charity called Rally for Vets, and I'm also a fellow at the National Security Institute at George Mason.
Nice. That was some background I didn't know. Fantastic set of credentials there. Jack, I'm going to go to you next. Can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself and your experience with startups?
Yeah, I'm Jack, and I started working in the first startup boom when I was 15 years old, full-time, dropped out of high school. That was a long time ago. I'll just say that. Since then, I had a career, and I retired and started focusing on startups. I advised about 20 startups. I've tried starting my own startup, but easier to teach than to do, as they say, right? So right now, I'm working at Uptick as a technology evangelist. It pulled me away from my startup work because I was so fascinated by the product. And I want to underline something, Chris. You just raised some money, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. We're every year a group of security folks run a thing called Pitch for Charity at RSA and DEF CON as well, DEF CON Black Hat, where vendors sign up, they bid to basically pitch for 15 minutes to a group to like 30 or so CISOs and security buyers. We raised just over $50,000 this year. So I'm super excited for that event. Next Wednesday. So if you're a CISO or a security buyer, please sign up. The links somewhere in my LinkedIn. I've posted it about 1 million times.
Sorry for the detour, right? We have Crystal to intro as well.
Love that. Great pitch. Yeah, Crystal, can you give us a couple sentences about yourself?
Yeah, totally. And no worries. You always gotta get the pitch in there where you can. So my name is Crystal Ponish. I'm the product marketing manager for cloud security at Uptix. I've been in startups and security for the past 10 years. So super interested, honestly, to hear from Chris. I've worked kind of behind the scenes. I've worked on just kind of researching and selling to security buyers and startups. So yeah, that's my background.
Wonderful. Chris, I was reading the sort of byline and, back cover on your book, and one of the lines was that it covers everything a founder, entrepreneur, and venture capitalist should know when building a secure company. And then you went on and it says that kind of no matter where someone is in the startup process, first round of funding, looking to level up, that this book is really for everyone who's involved with a startup in this way, who's building it from the ground up. So I want to start us out knowing that we probably have a really wide audience right now in terms of who's actually listening and who is the perfect audience for this book, because it kind of sounds like a lot of people are,
Yep.
So cross industry, cross like size, cross funding opportunities for companies. Let's talk about the crucial elements for a cybersecurity posture. What should everyone know?
So that is certainly the intention of the book. I really wanted to make it approachable and digestible by pretty much anyone, right? You should pretty much be able to pick up the book, no technical background, and go implement the things that I talked through in the book. And it's stuff most people in cybersecurity know and have heard of. It's really the building blocks, right? So the way I kind of categorize it in the book is starting in the smallest possible light, starting with the data in your environment, right? Everyone's got some type of crown jewels, is what we've always liked to define them as. The thing that's most important to your organization. That could be IP. That could be maybe your customers' data. A whole laundry list of things that make your business the business it is, right? Moving out from there to the systems that lives on, and then the people and things that have access to that. I found if you break it down like that, it's a lot more manageable instead of trying to boil the ocean, so to speak, where, okay, we got to secure everything. We've got to think of every single risk, because security is not a zero-sum game, right? Like, you're not going to get to zero. You're going to manage the risk. And that's really, I think, our job as security professionals, and even as a founder, right, is you're managing risk on behalf of your business. You're the one that knows where the right places to take risks are, or you wouldn't have a business in the first place, right? That is the point of building a startup. You're taking big risks and making big bets. So I was going to say kind of the main foundational things, right? So things like EDR, things like or XDR, whatever we're calling it today, strong credential controls, right? Using a password manager, all the basic stuff, because that cuts out so many of the risks and attack vectors that are out there. And these are all doable things by any founder, right? Like, okay, maybe you don't go buy the enterprise tool day one, right? You buy maybe some prosumer, old school antivirus. Like, it is bare
OpenVast.
minimum. Say that again.
Remember OpenVast?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, right. Don't do that. Don't do
Yeah,
that.
I don't. That's a lot of work. Password managers, right? Using multi-factor authentication. We are certainly getting better as an industry. I think helping lead people to the right direction, making it easier to turn on MFA. We're not fully there, right? Like, I've got, I think, 4 or 5 MFA apps on my phone, right? Because not everyone uses the same thing. Some banks, I won't name names, but have just dove in on one piece of technology, and you have to have that app for that bank versus, I just want to use, this authenticator app that gives me codes for everything. So we need to make it, we collectively as cybersecurity need to make it easier for our customers, which is, everyone else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're making me think too of a part of like a bigger conversation, which is really why does cybersecurity get left behind in startups? Why is it not like top of mind? Could you provide some answer to that? Because it seems a little sad to me. I want to be on the startup side.
I think we are at the point where, back in the 40s and 50s, when seatbelts were still an optional purchase, right? It wasn't just a thing you expect to be in the car. I think we're still at that point, right? It's a big cost for most organizations to swallow right out of the gate, especially a cash conscious startup, right? And everyone is efficiency conscious today, right? Like, I don't think you could throw a stone without finding a startup that is really focused on efficiency right now and not burning through tons of cash. There's, again, it goes back to what risks are you willing to take, right? And which are the right ones, and finding the right people to help guide you to make those right decisions for your business, right? So you look at it, founding team, maybe you don't have general counsel right out of the gate. Maybe you have, some outside firm that you use. It's kind of that same thing, right? Like it would be great if everyone had internal general counsel that they can just go to. Every crazy red line that comes back from a customer, they can go to them instead of spending, whatever crazy retain $1,500 for a retainer to have one MSA looked at or something like that, right? So it's a necessity at one time, but there's the small building blocks you have to do to get there. It can't just be, oh, you're going to hire, a CISO that's done this 15 times right out of the gate, build a whole cybersecurity program in 1 year and get SOC 2 and ISO and all these other great things. You really have to work closely with your customers and kind of let them dictate a little bit what direction you need to go in, right? If no one's asking for SOC 2, maybe that's a thing, that fire can smolder for a little bit, and that can be a next year thing or 2-3 years down the road. But if someone's asking for that out of the gate and they won't, it's a giant lighthouse customer, they're not going to sign without that. Well, that's your indication you need to probably move in that direction.
Well, in that vein, right, with SOC compliance, if you're a 2-person startup company, SOC compliance is nothing, right? Because you can cross off and descope so many of the controls. So I like to tell startup founders, when you're really small, how hard is security awareness training when it's just you and your co-founder? It's like, you ask them a couple questions, cool, you're security aware, right? Yep. At a big company, it's really hard. So there are certain things that people can do to get started early in security, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When that SOC compliance comes down the pipes, you don't have to completely restructure your development organization to meet some sort of CI/CD security requirement that's in some of the SOCOs. But I really like your approach to risk, and I like your emphasis on zero sum, right? So many people that do what we do, Chris, they think that they're like, well, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to be, completely breach free, and that's not the point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think we've got to change that mindset. Everyone's gonna get hit at one point. You just need to be ready for it. Right.
Arm wrestling competition at RSA.
Okay.
If you think that, I'll have a stand-in to cover me.
But Chris, I'm curious. So, from my perspective, in the kind of DevSecOps world, I believe we should be building security in at every step, right? So, security should no longer be considered separate from development, product security, IT security, endpoint security, incident response, whatever, right? We want to unify. What are your thoughts there? Has anything changed with the kind of cloud native revolution in recent years and the introduction of DevSecOps?
So I love that you said that, because what you're saying is it's an operational role, right? It cuts across the business. It's not a technology risk, right? It's an operational risk to the business, right? I can't tell if you agree with me, Jack. Maybe that was
150%. I agree with you. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Chris, go on.
Yeah. So that's one of many components, right? There's a lot we can do, especially if you're a company that's building a software product. Certainly that's an area you need to focus in, getting it as early as possible. I've been at plenty of companies where I didn't come in that early, right? It was, like my book, much later stage. And we're now having to kind of walk backwards on things, find unique ways to mitigate risks where, okay, we're not going to go back and change this piece of technology. We're not going to swap out this underlying infrastructure. Now we have to get creative, right? And reduce that risk versus, okay, you're going to stop delivering features for 6 months and all you're going to work on is tech debt. I guarantee anyone that says that to their executive team is not going to be a CISO at that organization for much
You'll
longer.
get fired immediately. Like I've seen CISOs try to do things like that, right? But yeah, you have to understand the customer's requirements, right? Like look at the VSACs, right? And that's what they're looking for. Sometimes when you join a company as a CISO, right? I mean, you're increasing the value of their product by a ton just by gaining more book, by being SOC 2 compliant or something like that.
Yep.
But interestingly, startups are some of the companies that focus the least in security, even security startups, right? Have you noticed that, Chris? Like other,
I have noticed that. Yes.
Why is that? That seems counterintuitive, Crystal.
I will say from interviewing a ton of CISOs and startup leaders, especially prior to Log4j, it just felt like there was this attitude in the industry of it won't happen to me. There's also like a common adage in marketing to security leaders that if you talk to a CISO about APTs or advanced persistent threats, their eyes just glaze over, right? And so,
I
which is
totally,
crazy because, yeah.
it just happened. Right when you said that, I'm like,
Yeah, right. So you can say, hey, like, look, right now, like an attacker could be dwelling in your environment, you'd have no idea. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. Look, like until this hits my bottom line, I just can't think about the million hypothetical like vulnerabilities and 0 days that can hit me. It's just like anything in life. It's that risk calculation, right? So that's my thought.
you're 100% correct.
And I think it's our job to help translate that risk back to the business, right? We've got to get to the point where it's as simple as I'm willing to bet everyone watching this looks both ways before they cross their street, right? So we've got to get to that point where cybersecurity is that easy, right? You just don't think about it. It just happens. It's muscle memory. And for the business to like be able to absorb that, I think that's our job of really having to translate it, right? Like, I've been in plenty of organizations, or let's say, what I would say the next most complicated operations role would be legal, right? In the organization of okay, why can't we just sign this deal that's, puts us up for 100% liability, right? Like 10x, the ARR for the deal or something like that. And right, watching those parts of the business re-explain things, where they're experts, right? I didn't go to law school. Most of the rest of the organization didn't go to law school. But I think we've got to get to that level where everyone really understands what it is, what the hell we're saying, right? It can't just be us talking to each other, because we live this, day in and day out. It's really got to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, there's a CISO I talked to very recently, Chris, who had legal reporting into him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, GC was reporting into him. Yeah. But so at a startup, I mean, obviously, you're not going to have a legal team, right?
I mean, it depends. You might. I mean, at Crossbeam, we do. We have a GC and one other person on that team. We're just sub 100 people. But it's going to, depend on the organization. Deal velocity too is going to, push that along, right? If you're spending $50K a year on outside firms to review just deals, it's probably time to bring that in house.
But definitely have counsel if you're a startup.
Yes. Yeah. In some form or fashion, inside or outside. Yes.
It's like my first step as your advisor after seeing this FAST agreement is to tell you that this FAST agreement is full of holes in my favor.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to, if we can, briefly go back like a couple sentences and talk about this idea of translating, because I feel like, Crystal, you're someone who has emphasized the power of storytelling. And we also have the chance to talk to Chris, who's an author right now. And I'm wondering if we can provide some like commentary and some tips on how to translate, how to actually take technical cybersecurity policy information and share the story, the importance, the relevancy with people who have never heard of MFA. Let's just say it's like some kind of dramatic example like that. Crystal, any thoughts on that? I'm kind of springing this on you.
No, it's actually quite prescient because I actually got some of my start at Auth0, right? And so whenever we were creating the category of identity and access management, it wasn't considered security at the time. Like the concept of a pre-built login box or outsourcing that wasn't really truly considered. And so Okta existed, and Okta was doing B2B and B2E authentication. But the idea of identity and access management, particularly customer identity and access management, wasn't a thing. And it was like, to me, working in an engineering department, I understood how your authentication was, I mean, it's just critical attack vector, right? Like the idea that engineers were building it from scratch in-house completely and perfectly and creating massive security holes, and that organizations didn't even realize like how much time are your engineers wasting building something they'll never be able to do well, right? So
Right.
our huge message was, and the way we simplify this was it became a build versus buy argument. And I think like ultimately I'll let Chris answer after this, because I think he can probably speak more specifically, but I just think you can also think in terms of human nature, right? And I work in marketing now, and it's like you always start with your audience, right? No matter who it is. If it's a technical, a business buyer, whatever category or label you put on people, at the end of the day, it's a human on the other end, right? So what's their vested interest? What's their number one priority? What's their number one pain? Start with your audience. Think about what they care about, not what you care about, and go from there, and ruthlessly prioritize, like, okay, they care about this. How do I map my case to that? So that's where I see people struggle most. I think we often, when we want to sell the case, and especially technologists, we get really, especially engineers, like, you're excited about what you've built, you're excited about the technology. Sometimes it seems so black and white and clear to me when I explain how something works, what the value is, and why you would need it. But it's actually not always that clear. So you have to really tell the story, start with the emotions, start with the audience, and be patient in that. So
I think that was really good advice. Chris, can you add to that?
I think it was all correct, and it's going to be hard to add to that. But I guess share a story then, an example of organization I worked at. We had a really big federal arms, sold into the federal government, a little bit state and local, but mostly federal government. That sales cycle works a lot differently than selling to a large enterprise, right? This could be multi-year thing, right? And governments pull contracts and rebid, put them out for bid. So getting that team to care about certain things and how we control stuff around those organizations' data, right, really had to be tied exactly to what their end goal was, right? Is winning the bid and then being able to win the rebids, right? Like really at the end of the day, because that is how that individual would get paid and compensated, right? Typical sales team, right? You come with a certain quota you have to hit, you get paid on a certain amount. If you go over a certain amount, you get paid even more, all different types of ways of benefiting a sales team. So really, like to Crystal's point, you've got to go talk to those people first, learn about them, right? Before you say a single thing about what the hell you do, right? Like learn everything you can about what they do, because then it's much easier to translate stuff like, oh, you care about closing this deal. Oh, you care about reducing risk around liability on our contracts. Oh, you care about delivering all these features really quickly in our product, right? And then you can tell your message to those things, right?
Right.
Doing X is going to help you achieve Y, right?
Jack, or Crystal, go ahead.
No, I got excited just thinking about those things, right? And also like how when I tell that story about engineers building login from scratch, I saw Jack and Chris's, like they physically go like this. And it's also that part, like that's the human storytelling part. That's a golden thread that runs through music and technology and anything you do. Put it in a story, put it in something that the people you're talking to understand.
Yeah. It was triggering a little bit, I think, too. How many times, Chris, have you seen people write their own session management?
Too many times. And at security companies too. Like I'll give people the benefit of doubt that aren't a security company, but that's been disheartening.
And to follow up on what you were saying, right? If you're talking about customer requirements dictating your security program, imagine if you're a startup, you're trying to get POCs, you're trying to get your initial business, you're working on your GTM, right? A lot of these companies that you're reaching out to, they're not telling you that they're not POCing your product because you don't have SOC compliance. And they're required to, you're required to have SOC compliance so that they can get their SOC compliance certified. Well, I'm not telling you that SOC compliance is a 5-person startup, but you can certainly have a VSAC prepared with some simple security controls. And when you're a 5-person company, that's a piece of cake to do.
Yep.
So
and I would actually push back a little bit. Again, this is, their skill level and ability to kind of explain, right? If you're not going to be a sub-processor to them, if you're not going to be a critical vendor, right? This is all based on how they scoped their own SOC 2, right? If they said every vendor we use is a critical vendor, then it's probably going to be hard to get around that one. But if you're able to put yourself in the category of saying, oh, hey, we don't connect to this system that you say is really critical, or we don't have this data set that you feel is really critical. Oh, we don't need a SOC 2 because in your definition, we're not critical. We wouldn't be included in your SOC 2, or we wouldn't be a sub processor. That's another super fun one on the GDPR front.
That's a good tip though. You classify your data. Right?
Yep.
Data classification can allow you to determine if, like, your customers to determine if you're processing their critical data, their confidential, or their informational data.
Right. Exactly.
This actually feeds really nicely into kind of just product marketing and product market fit in general in an early stage startup, which is defining your ICP. Going back to that storytelling piece, defining who your ideal customer is from day one is going to help shape every decision you make. Right.
Yeah.
So that's how you determine, okay, like if I'm selling to a high tech enterprise or a high security enterprise, this is what I need to provide, or otherwise.
It's all about empathy.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
It truly is.
I'm wondering too, Jack, this is kind of more of a question for you, because when you're advising a startup founder or people who are part of startups, how much time do you have to delve into that, right? Because talking about their ICP and talking about their goals, all that takes time to research, but they're the ones who have come to you saying, like, please help me with this. Any tips on that?
Yeah, they'll take as much of your time as you're unwilling to give. I'm just kidding. If anybody's ever listening, sorry guys. But no, you can talk on and on and on. But really, what you want to think about, it's another empathy thing, I guess. They're small, they're tiny. There's easy things that they can do. I acquired a two-person company at a former employer, and I think they invented Scantron. Remember those little, number 2 pencil things? Yeah, and so
Bad memories, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Solid testing childhood.
Yeah.
Remember, I dropped out of high school at 15 and go with the .com bubble, so I only got half as much Scantron. But one of them was the founder of Scantron, they're like, well, I'm so sorry, I know our security posture is terrible, and I'm like, well, just tell me about it, and I was blown away, and I'm like, why do you think it was terrible? They're like, well, we didn't invest much time and money into it, and that speaks miles. So when I'm talking to a founder and they want to discuss an enterprise grade security program, I'm like, nah, it's actually very simple. Classify your data. I could be their consultant for everything data protection and privacy related, right? So it's really a piece of cake, and it's going to save you millions down the line in tech debt if you spend what would you say, Chris, 10 hours for a 2-person company?
Yeah, if that. Yeah.
If that. Yeah.
Yep. And you spend 5 of those hours reading my book, and then the other 5 implementing.
I love it. Perfect plug. As our wrap-up question, because I know we all have a lot of RSA work to get back to, Chris, I'm going to spring this on you a little bit.
Okay.
There's one thing, just one, that you could distill for folks and say, why should they grab a free copy of your book? What would it be?
You will better manage risk for your business, regardless of the role you're in.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that will probably appeal to a lot of people who are looking to do that. Okay, wonderful. Well, to our audience, I have successfully dropped the link and the secret code into the comments. So if you're just seeing this or just joining us, don't worry, you're not quite too late. I'm drawing out this little speech that I'm giving right now, so you have a little bit of extra time to go and snag your free copy of Chris Castaldo's book, Startup Secure. Go and grab that right now. We also have a couple more resources I want to direct you to in case you're wanting to have this be the start of the conversation. Obviously, you can head to the Upticks blog. We have a piece written by Laura Kenner describing also some topics that we've covered in this conversation and more. You'll also find a link to Chris's storefront, so please follow up with that. You can also always connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Please feel free to do that. Drop us a message. I think we're all trying to not only listen to each other a little bit more, but have some really good conversations on LinkedIn. So please feel free to do that. And I've just found out too that we will all, in fact, be at RSA this year, which is happening next week. If you're just catching this on the replay, So please feel free to follow us there and come say hi. The Upticks booth is 0335, and you really are not going to want to miss it. We are literally building a nerd wall of locally sourced comics, vintage,
Superman.
amazing things. It's going to be so cool. So please come by. We're all really excited about it. And we also have plenty of other events. You can also check the Upticks blog or social media for those as well. But to round us out, Chris, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for telling us so much about your book. Total honor to have you here.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. This is fun.
And Crystal and Jack, thank you for joining as always, and we will see you next week on Cybersecurity Stand Up.
Looking forward to it.
Bye.